Nigel Pennick, The Lost Language of the Vikings, Runes, Myths and Living Traditions. The Forgotten Alphabet. Throughout Northern Europe, thousands of mysterious symbols have survived. They are carved into standing stones, engraved on weapons, cut into wooden staffs, and hidden among the treasures of the Viking Age. Most people think they were simply an ancient alphabet. They weren't. For the people who created them, every rune carried a meaning far beyond its sound. Each one represented an idea, a force, perhaps even a way of understanding the universe itself. So what exactly were the runes, and why do they continue to fascinate us more than 1,000 years later?
Chapter 1. What are runes? Most people think of runes simply as an alphabet, but they are much more than that. Like our own alphabet, each rune represents a sound, but unlike our modern letters, every rune also carries its own meaning and character. Each one embodies an idea drawn from the natural world and from human experience. A rune is never just a mark carved into stone or wood. It is a symbol that links language, memory, and meaning. That is why the old rune masters treated them with such respect. They were not merely writing words. They were preserving an entire way of understanding the world. Chapter 2. Runes as a sacred language. We tend to think of writing as simply a way of recording information. The people who created the runes saw them rather differently. They believed that every rune expressed something fundamental about the structure of the world. Each rune represented not only a sound, but also an idea, a natural force, or an aspect of human experience. In that sense, the runes formed a symbolic language. They allowed people to express ideas that ordinary speech could never fully capture. That is why they were carved into memorial stones, weapons, jewellery, and sacred objects. A rune was never simply a letter. It was a way of bringing meaning into the world. Chapter 3. Myth and Memory. Every traditional culture tells stories about the origins of its sacred knowledge. The Norse world was no different. According to tradition, the runes were not invented. They were discovered. The old stories tell how Odin willingly sacrificed himself upon the world tree, seeking wisdom rather than power. Only through that sacrifice were the runes revealed to him. Whether we understand that story as history or as myth is almost beside the point. Myths preserve truths that cannot easily be expressed in ordinary language. They explain who we are, where we came from, and how human beings should live in the world. The runes belong to that world of memory. They remind us that wisdom was once understood as something to be sought, earned, and passed from one generation to the next. Chapter 4. Living Traditions. It is often assumed that the old traditions simply disappeared with the coming of Christianity or the modern world. I don't believe that happened. Traditions rarely vanish overnight. More often, they change their outward form while preserving something of their original meaning. We can still find traces of them in village customs, in seasonal festivals, in old place names, in the crafts that people continued to practice, and even in the way churches and towns were built. Much of what we regard as ordinary local tradition is, in fact, the surviving memory of a much older way of understanding the world. That is why folklore matters. It preserves knowledge that was never written down. It reminds us that the past is never completely lost. It continues to live quietly beneath the surface of everyday life. Chapter 5. The Revival of the Old Ways. During the 19th century, people began to take a fresh interest in the old traditions. Antiquarians, archaeologists and folklorists started recording customs that had survived for generations in villages and rural communities. During the 20th century, that work continued. Ancient monuments were studied more carefully. Old manuscripts were translated. Traditional crafts and symbolic systems began to receive the serious attention they deserved. Today, there is a growing interest in these subjects once again. People are rediscovering runes, traditional craftsmanship, sacred landscapes, and the wisdom preserved in folklore. I think that reflects a deeper search for meaning. In an age of rapid change, many people are beginning to ask the same questions that our ancestors asked. They are looking once again for roots, for continuity, and for a sense of belonging within a much older tradition. That is why folklore matters. It preserves knowledge that was never written down. It reminds us that the past is never completely lost. It continues to live quietly beneath the surface of everyday life. Chapter 6. Symbols for the Future. We sometimes imagine that symbols belong to the past. I don't believe they do. Human beings have always understood the world through stories, images, and symbols. That has never changed. Technology changes. Society changes. But human nature remains remarkably constant. We still look for meaning. We still seek identity. We still need symbols that connect us with one another, with the landscape, and with the generations that came before us. That is why the old symbols continue to speak to us, not because they belong to a vanished civilization, but because they express something permanent in the human condition. The task is not to recreate the past. It is to understand it and to carry its wisdom into the future.
Closing reflection. The old symbols never really disappeared. They have simply waited, carved into stone, hidden within ancient stories, preserved in forgotten customs, remembered by the landscape itself. For centuries they have remained in plain sight, quietly passing from one generation to the next, waiting for those who still know how to recognize them. Perhaps the real mystery is not why our ancestors created those symbols, but why we have forgotten how to read them. And perhaps, as more people begin to rediscover them, they will once again remind us who we are, where we came from, and what we may yet become.